What's going on, guys, and welcome back to another video. This video is going to be yet another very special video for my channel, as I will be reviewing what might just be the rarest Daron Realtoy model in the entire world, and is a model that sparked so many questions about Daron and Realtoy for its production. So without further ado, I will be reviewing the JetBlue Airways Ribbons Tail Livery Airbus A321neo prototype. Being one of two models ever produced, this is in fact the prototype for the failed 2023 release of the JetBlue Airbus A321. And with there only being two in existence, I think this model most certainly deserves to have the title of the world's rarest Daron Realtoy airplane. So now for the question I'm sure everyone is going to be asking is, how in the world did I get my hands on this insanely rare and exclusive Daron Realtoy model? And the answer to that is that I am currently borrowing it from my good friend Realtoy Plane Collector on Instagram, and he also just recently made a YouTube channel as well, with the links to both of those posted in the description of this video. So for those of you who are on Instagram, you may have seen Realtoy Plane Collector's post of this model from several months ago after he was able to acquire it from the airplane shop warehouse sale in New Jersey this past August 2024. When he acquired this model, he had actually found it in a bag with several mixed items, most of them being Daron pullback planes, for just $3.95, pretty much with Daron just giving the model away and wanting absolutely nothing to do with it. So this model did not come with a box because since there were only the two prototypes ever made, there was not a box yet released for this model. So Realtoy Plane Collector was able to purchase this model and make an amazing addition to his collection, and now I have asked him if I would be able to borrow this model and review it as part of my channel's 4-year anniversary. For those new to my channel, February 20th is the anniversary day of when I first made my YouTube channel and uploaded my very first video in 2021, with this year being my 4th year on YouTube and this video also being my 500th video upload. For 3 years in a row now, I have been posting review videos of extremely rare, high demand, and exclusive or different types of Realtoy models, with 2 years ago being my yellow DHL Boeing 757 large airport playset review, and last year being my FedEx A380 transportation fleet set review, which has since become actually my most viewed video on my channel and is still growing. The links to those videos are posted in the description of this video as well, and I want to give a huge special thanks to everyone who has supported my channel these past few years and has helped my channel grow, and I'm looking forward to what the future holds for this channel. So now getting into the full background history for this amazing model. So the JetBlue A321neo was first announced as a completely new Realtoy mold on December 31st, 2022, along with the Virgin Atlantic 787 and A350. Although the model I have here unfortunately does not have a manufacturing date, so we can't know the exact date this model was made, its announcement does give a good estimate that it was manufactured most likely in mid to late 2022. And I did check the original stock photos, and this model here actually is not the exact A321neo that was shown in those pictures, and is actually of the other prototype model, but it actually is great having close-up photos of both prototypes now, with this one being here and then the second prototype being in those stock photos. So according to Daron's Instagram post, the model was originally scheduled to be released around mid-2023, most likely as a single plane. But this post was the only thing that Daron had shared all throughout 2023 of the A321, with no updates being announced all throughout the year, and eventually word got out that the model was canceled. The reason for the cancellation was most likely due to the trouble Realtoy was having that ultimately made them shut down in early 2024, with Daron taking over the production of the models. So I'm still not exactly sure why Realtoy did shut down. I'm not sure if they had went out of business and Daron just took over the production, or if they bought out Realtoy. And there really is no way for me to actually know, since Realtoy was a very private company. All they did was just manufacture these planes. They were a lot more popular throughout the 90s, and they actually did distribute some planes, but once Daron was introduced and was founded in the late 90s, I think early 2000s, they had taken over the process of actually distributing the planes, and they had their whole entire brand going, and Realtoy became a much more private company. So I wish I was able to find out what exactly happened to Realtoy, because I know a lot of other collectors really want to know as well, but unfortunately I'm not sure if there really is a way to find out. But it is still also very odd that this A321neo model wasn't even produced for just a short period of time, considering that it was already being planned and designed throughout the end of 2022, and Realtoy didn't shut down until at least about a year and a half later, in early 2024. So I know myself, and I'm sure many others could agree, that canceling the production of this model was probably one of the biggest mistakes that Daron had made, and they could have made a really great profit off of this model if they had actually kept the production for it going. And although it did seem like the production of the Daron A321 seemed to be lost in the past and pretty much forgotten, in November 2024, Daron had released an all-new JetBlue Airways playset concept for their newest livery design, with the model included being the A321neo. This new playset will feature the now Daron manufactured A321neo wearing JetBlue's new fully blue livery branding, specifically the bubble wrap or balloons paint scheme, with that livery also being the main theme for the rest of the playset. It will also have an all-new themed catering truck, and the A321 model included in the playset will also be fully painted. The playset is scheduled to be released along with the new JetBlue Spotlight livery, Airbus A320, as the single plane of this new set of JetBlue models, and they were originally scheduled to be released on March 1st, 2025, but I have a feeling that those dates have been pushed back. I did notice that the Airplane Shop website has actually been updated since then. Just in the past couple weeks, I think Airplane Shop went through a major upgrading process for their website, and they had actually taken down several things that I know a lot of people will not like. Myself, I have not actually purchased anything off of Airplane Shop yet, so I'm really not affected by it, but I do know people who use it a lot are probably not going to like the update, because it looks like they had taken away the process for pre-ordering, and they don't even have dates showing when items are supposed to be released for specifically for new releases. And all it shows for this new A321 playset is that it is just currently out of stock. But I do remember from screenshots, I do still have the model was originally scheduled to be released on March 1st, 2025, but considering that everything else that they have pretty much had dates pushed back, it definitely is a big possibility that those release dates were pushed back even later, but unfortunately, I really do not know what dates they could be. All we can hope is that I'll wait till March 1st, and then we'll see if the models were actually released or not. But I do know Daron should not be canceling this A321 again, knowing how high the demand was for this ribbons livery A321, and pretty much how major of a mistake that was. And in addition to this new to-be released Daron made A321, this model here is also going to be the only ever produced Realtoy A321 model. So in the end, the A321 getting to be produced is great, but it still is really unfortunate that there never got to be a Realtoy mass-produced JetBlue A321, along with the fact that I doubt Daron will ever reintroduce this white fuselage ribbons tail livery A321 again, this specific model, just as a Daron-produced one. Making these two prototypes the only two of its kind. And with these being the only two models of the ribbons tail livery design, it pretty much makes collecting the entire fleet of Realtoy JetBlue models physically impossible. So this model is one of 7 different liveries of the JetBlue Realtoy models, with the others being the 3 retro liveries, which unfortunately I do not have all 3, but I do have the 2 main ones, with the most common and well-known one being the Bubbles tail design. I don't exactly remember the specific tail design for this one, if it is Bubbles or if it's something else, but this is the name of it. On the front is Song Sung Blue, and is the most common one. And then the second most common one is the kind of pixelated box design. On the tail, this one is the Blue Yorker, which I kind of think this one has a more common name than the Song Sung Blue, but yet this livery design is the most common of the retro ones. And then the third retro livery is the fully kind of blued out tail design, which I don't remember the exact name for that one, or if it does have a different name, but I do know it is considered as a different type of JetBlue retro livery design, since there is no specific design on the tail. And then the most common JetBlue model is the most recently produced A320, and that is the Blueberries tail design. There is a stickered and fully painted version of this model, but I'm only counting the specific livery design, not for the production type of if it has stickers or not. I do not have a painted one. These are just the stickers ones that I have. I have 2 of these. I have this one, which came in a single plane, and I have one from a playset. And then the other 2 models are going to be the newly released A321 and A320 in the newest updated JetBlue's livery for the bubble wrap or balloons paint scheme, and then the Spotlight livery for the A320. So hoping that those models are actually going to be released, and hopefully not too long after their originally scheduled release date of March 1st. So I will do a full JetBlue fleet rundown later on in this video, showcasing every single one of the JetBlue models along with the A320. But for now, finishing off the final information for this A321 model. The A321neo is fully painted, and although it doesn't have a real registration number, it does have a name at the front of the nose that says A Mint Summer Night's Dream, which is the name for a real JetBlue A321neo in the ribbon's tail design that has registration number November 2142 Juliet. This Airbus A321neo was delivered new to JetBlue on June 4th, 2021 and is currently still flying for the airline. So for a brief background on JetBlue Airways, they were first founded 26 years ago in August 1998, and it actually just celebrated their 25th year anniversary of when they first started operations, which was February 11th of 2000. They have since grown to have a fleet of 290 aircraft and 114 destinations, and I believe they are currently adding several more destinations to that as well. They have a fleet of 10 Airbus A321neos with an additional 33 on order. I'm not exactly sure how many A321neos are painted in the ribbon's tail design, but honestly, the tail design along with the scales design is also one of my favorites. For the fleet. I think it just looks really great on the plane, and you definitely can tell that for this Realtoy model, and kind of does add to the shame of the fact that this was not actually a mass-produced model for Realtoy, but I think it does have an amazing design on it, and I don't think I've actually been able to see one of these in person yet, but it definitely is a really nice livery for the JetBlue aircraft. The ribbon's tail livery was first introduced in February 2021, and I believe they are still painting it and adding it on to newer A321neo aircraft. So that pretty much is all the information and history behind the JetBlue A321, and I honestly can say how many ever times I need to about the fact how disappointing it really is that this model never made it into full production. So, but getting into the actual model review for this, up close and full model review and my personal opinions on the production of this model, for at least for the prototype of how it was produced. So, starting off with the cockpit of this really nice model. So, the first thing I wanted to say is just how really great it was that Realtoy had designed this, the nose on this model. As you probably remember, the A320 nose is a completely different design format, and honestly, in my opinion, it looks a lot like the Embraer E190 nose, or just an Embraer nose in general for either the E175 or E170 or E190. It just, to me, this does not look like an A320 nose, but the A321 definitely did, it was a huge upgrade. So the nose on this model actually is fully curved, and it perfectly resembles the A321, and I mean, showing a front shot as well. This model is also one of the first ones I've had in a long time where the cockpit windows are actually perfectly straight. Like, you can see there, it is perfectly horizontal, there's no crookedness, and honestly, also doesn't look to be too far up or too far down on the nose. Perfectly aligned right there. I did see the pictures of the other prototype. Those ones do seem to be a little bit crooked. I mean, I guess it doesn't even matter if it's a prototype. It just depends on however the plane was produced. But honestly, I even have a Gemini Jets model with crooked cockpit windows, so I guess it's just very common amongst all type of airplane model distributors. But anyway, the nose on this model is really nicely designed, and I just think it coincides really nicely and just adds the amazing character for this plane. And like usual with all Realtoy models, it's got the little smile there. I think that just makes it look a lot better. And honestly, I would really hope Daron would later produce a PSA version of this model, the American Airlines PSA Retro, and add that little smile to actually have it be a smile rather than just the simple things for the production, and paint that specifically to be a smile. I think that would definitely make this model look really, really nice. Moving on, behind the cockpit windows, you can see there is the name for this plane with the little Mint logo, and it says A Mint Summer Night's Dream in that really nice design there. I'm still not sure why there is no registration number on it, because there's only one A321 that has that name on it, which is why I was able to research it and find out the exact model that this is based off of, even though there is no registration number. So after that name on the front of the plane, or pretty much right below that, you see the landing gear, which amazingly on this one, there is, the landing gear on this model is not wobbly at all. It is perfectly straight in there, really nice and snug, unlike certain things like the A330 and A340. Those models are known for having really loose nose gears. So moving on, behind the name of the plane, you can see right there is the really nicely detailed first main cabin door, which just has some very basic, simple details, as there are on lots of Airbus A320 cabin doors and other cabin doors as well, but still does have nice detail with the little latch right there and then a small window beside it, and then the emergency exit slide down beneath that. Moving on to that, there is the first beginning of the cabin windows with the JetBlue logo really nicely painted and printed right there. You can see in the reflection of the lighting, actual, like, the print design of it, which it still doesn't actually feel like, it still doesn't feel like the new Daron made print design, which is really grainy, and you can even see it in the reflection. This one actually does look like paint, which is really nice. Honestly, I like this a lot better, this painted look to it. But really nicely painted there. All the cabin windows throughout the plane are really nicely in place and horizontal. They're not crooked or unaligned at all. They're perfectly centered on the plane and just really, really nice, and helps add to this really kind of sophistication of this model, especially for being just a simple toy or for Realtoy model. Moving on from the cabin windows, from the front cabin windows, I'm not sure if this gap is really on the Airbus A321. I'll have to look at some pictures after I'm done with that. But I do think this gap right here does seem to be a little bit too big, and I think they probably should have added some more windows there, or maybe adjusted a few things. I'm not sure if that is on the actual aircraft, like I said before, and again, I'll have to research that after I'm done with this video, but after the gap is the continuation of the cabin windows throughout the rest of the model. And then right there in the center, you see the door plugs with the two windows on the insides of those as well. You can see right there are the beautifully painted engines with the JetBlue.com in their dark blue tail design. I'll have to just take off my model stand right here. Something that Daron definitely needs to actually start producing a lot more of, because I only have 2 of these, because they're only sold in the British Airways 747s. But anyway, the engines are really nicely designed on this model. You can see right there in the engine cowlings on the inside, and they have the engine cone on the inside there as well, right there in the center. Beautifully designed. These ones are also perfectly printed on there and perfectly straight and aligned. Moving on to one of the other amazing characters for this plane. Honestly, one of the best things about this model is the wings. So I'm not sure if you noticed earlier or in other photos, but right here there are actually different and a lot more wing flaps than there actually were on the A320s. So kind of adding on to a little comparison for one of my A320 models here, you could see there definitely is a lot more flaps on the A321, and honestly it makes it look even more realistic in my opinion. And I think my favorite design to the wings is right here next to the connected to the cabin is what I believe is supposed to be the emergency exits. Even though it does not have the specific designs for it, it does have the outline, which I think makes it look really, really nice and just makes it look a lot more realistic. Because honestly, I don't think that is a flap. I'm not really sure what else that would be anyway, and it's connecting to the door plugs, so that definitely should be the emergency exits, and is one of my favorite things on this model, and is definitely a new thing for all Realtoy planes as well. And then another thing with the wings is, of course, the definitely you can't go, these cannot go unnoticed, is the amazing sharklets on this model. Even though the actual ribbons livery does have painted sharklets, I think honestly just keeping it silver does kind of make it look really nice as well, even though they are supposed to be painted. But I'm not sure if these sharklets are too big for it. I think they might be a little bit too big for the plane, because I mean, as you can see right here, they pretty much go all the way above the model. Kind of laying flat right there. It goes all the way above the fuselage. I'm not sure if those are like that on the actual A321neo, but honestly, I guess if they were smaller, they would kind of take away from the fact that they're supposed to be neos. But yeah, the sharklets definitely are something that do not go unnoticed on this plane. So moving on behind the wings, there is the second main cabin door, or technically if you want to count the third after the door plugs. Right there is the second main cabin door, and then continuation of the cabin windows to the back of the plane as well. In the back, you can see there's supposed to be a registration number, which the registration number is supposed to be N2142J, but unfortunately they did not print that on this, but it does have the American flag, so you know the nationality of the plane. And right there you can see is the Airbus A321neo logo right there. I do know the Neo is really, really small, so it can be a little difficult to see that. But up close, you can definitely tell that it does say Neo and that this model is supposed to be a Neo as well. And also, I mean, another main indicator is that why would a normal A321 have this really excessively large sharklets? I don't really know why an A321 CEO does not have this intense amount of sharklets on it. And then moving on to past there is the rear cabin door, and then moving on obviously to the main source of detail for this model, and this is the tail. Honestly, this tail has even more design than the Blueberry's tail design. This one you can see here has the beautiful, it's all fully painted too, beautifully printed on. It's not some glazed over decal, which is, I know are on some of the newer planes as well. This is just a fully painted on, beautifully printed design right there. You can see there is the start of the ribbon going up along there to the curved pattern, and it even has the different colors of blue to represent the kind of the shadowed look to it, to make it look more three-dimensional, because otherwise if it didn't have that and it was all just one color, it would pretty much just be two squiggles rather than an actual ribbon design. So, and then right there you can see is the really nice whited out JetBlue logo with their little R right there, trademark thing in there as well. But beautifully printed design on here, and honestly, I just really do wish that this model was fully mass produced, because it really is such a nice model, and really great design. And honestly, I just think this is a major upgrade from the Blueberry's tail design. I do like it, but it was just produced for way too long, and I really wish they had more A320s with a different design on it. And A321 was just a huge major upgrade from that, and it just really is disappointing. Although I am really glad that they're going to be having a new A321, but the thing is though, the new A321 is going to be in a completely different livery design, and it really would have been nice to have this as a fully mass-produced model as well. So I did want to adjust my setup here real quick, just so I don't have every single shot of the A321 being me holding the model, just to get some shots right there without my hands in the way. But you can see right there, this is a great view of pretty much the sharklets going all the way above the fuselage. You can definitely tell they look really large for the plane, but I think it definitely just does add the character to it as well. Everything else looks really great, and I just cannot keep saying how the nose just looks so realistic for the plane. And I'm gonna be completely honest too, this seems to be the most realistic Realtoy model that has ever been produced, in my opinion. I know there were some other ones that were pretty realistic, like the A380 and 747 are pretty realistic for being made as toys, but I just think with all the amazing designs on this just really does look like the most realistic Realtoy model that they have produced. And I mean, if you take out the look of the more toy landing gear, it just definitely looks a lot more like a realistic sort of Gemini Jets model. And I definitely think this could be an amazing competition for it, and was one of the first Realtoy models in a long time that actually has a lot of great design to it. And along with A380, I mean, the A380 has a relatively simple cockpit nose section, but I think this is the first Airbus model to actually have more of a fully accurate nose design to it, definitely more than the A320. The A320 is honestly probably the worst in my opinion. And then the A350 also has to have some adjustments to it. I think it's a little bit too pointy. And then the A330 and the A340, those also kind of need a little bit more adjustments. But honestly, the A320 is just a perfectly designed Realtoy model, especially for it simply just being a toy or produced as a toy. So adjusting my setup one more time just to have some views of the A320 on the stand. Once again, like I mentioned before, I really wish Daron would make these stands a lot more, or include them in a lot more models, because you can't buy these separately, and the only common model that you can pretty much find it in is the British Airways 747, which I actually had bought 2 of them, and I wanted to keep one new condition, but I ended up having to open it anyway, because I needed another stand, because the other one I had for my Virgin Atlantic 747, one of the other few models that they actually made stands for, had broken. So now I only have 2. I used to have the 3, but unfortunately now I just have the 2 of these. And this model does fit really nicely on the stands, and it kind of does depend on however the hole is put in for the on the main landing gear for the model stand, and it could be either really loose or honestly the hole could be too tight to where the stand doesn't even fit inside of it at all. But going on to the last part of the review for this model is right here. You can see on the undercarriage is where there is the Realtoy logo for this plane. You have the really nicely designed JetBlue dark navy blue undercarriage. It still is nice, even though it's a dark color, it still is nice and very vibrant. And then you can see this one does have a little bit of a scuff right there. I mean, it's a prototype, so honestly, I'm surprised it doesn't have any more. And also too, like on usually the tip of the tail is usually where there gets a lot of scratches, but this one is really nice. It does not have anything on it throughout the entire rest of the plane, except right here on the undercarriage. But I mean, it is the bottom of the plane, so I'm really not surprised. Right there, you can see is the one and only Realtoy logo for, well, technically there's two, but you know what I mean, the Realtoy logo for one of the only two existing Realtoy A321s, and something you will not see on any other A321 models, with the Made in China logo right below that as well. And then you see there is the model stand hole right there directly in the center of that. I think the main landing gear pretty much looks the same as every other Realtoy model main landing gear, but the wheels do roll really nicely on this, and I think there was one issue though with one of these, one of the wheels. I think it was this one that does not go fully in, is out a little bit more and a little bit more loose, but honestly really not too bad. And the only two more issues I'd say with this plane is just that tiny issue with the wheel, and then technically the scuff, which could be easily fixed, but honestly I think it just adds to the character of it since it is a prototype. And yeah, that pretty much is all the review of it. The last thing is that there is no manufacturing date. I had shown this earlier in the video towards the beginning. There is no manufacturing date for this model right there on either of the tail wings. I really wish there would have been, but I mean, I don't think any Realtoy prototype would have a manufacturing date because it's just a prototype and not actually, I mean, it's not a real plane, so it's not going to have any other details on it. But as for the flaps on the wings, or at least on the other side of the wings, this does have some really nice detail on it, and I do know that there is actually no design on the bottom of the A320 wings. So this definitely is a major upgrade for the Airbus models. I do know some other ones do have some designs on there as well, but A321 definitely has a lot more than what there usually is, and great design with the fuel tanks coinciding there with the really nice design for the wing flaps, and overall, just everything looks really great on this model. So that pretty much is the entire review for the model for the A321neo model. So another thing that I wanted to do for while I have this plane and while I'm borrowing it is I wanted to show what it would have looked like if this model was produced in a box, or at least with a playset. So what I'm going to do is show what this model would have looked like if it were to be produced in a normal JetBlue airport playset. I am well aware that this model was supposed to be made as a single plane, but unfortunately I do not have a single plane box of any other JetBlue model other than the one Blueberries single plane box I have. And as you can tell, I mean, the Blueberries box pretty much has the entire theme as the Blueberries tail livery, and that does not go well with the Ribbons tail livery. So for this, I'll be using the playset box and parts of my other JetBlue playsets, and kind of showing what it would look like if it were made in a different sort of playset, just because the playset box for the retro bubbles delivery design was pretty much just completely all blue and did not have any specific designs to it. It does have some diamond design on it, but I mean, it really is not anything too much. So I think this one would definitely be the best box to do for this. So I'll be just showing some concepts that would have definitely looked really nice if this were to be made as an actual airport playset. So here is the first playset concept I have. This is with the all white plastic background for that the model sits in. So I did test this out before, and the A321 actually does fit perfectly inside of the playset box for the A320. It does fit, and it is a little bit loose, but that's more important than being too tight, and then it would end up scratching anything. So it does fit really nice and snug right there in the outline there, and the cutout for the A320. So this one is pretty much the normal plastic interior that comes with this playset box. This is for the bubbles tail design, or the more polka dot tail pattern on it for the retro livery. This is the one that this model originally came in. You can see right there part of the older logo on it. This one actually does not look too bad. I mean, it definitely looks nice with the main white fuselage coloring, and definitely is not bad. It does have the more retro vehicles to it, so it definitely would need to have some updated ones of those. But overall, this one is not really a bad concept. Honestly, this model definitely looks really great in a playset format anyway, with all of the other additional stuff to it, and then the JetBlue logos on there as well. And of course, I can't show the back of the box specifically for the A321, because the back of the box does show the design for the bubbles tail design, or the Song Blue A320. So this pretty much is completely unrelated to the A321. But that is pretty much it for the first main concept that I have. I mean, it does have the new Daron logo, so at least it is relevant, not too old. I do think the other design for it is a little bit too much of a dark blue. Then for this one, this blue is pretty much does match some of the coloring that there is in for the ribbons tail design. You can see right in there. I definitely think this box will be the best one out of all 3 different JetBlue box designs that they have produced, even out of the newer upcoming A321 in the new JetBlue livery design, the design for that box as well. So here is the second playset concept that I have. This is the box with the light blue plastic interior that the plane sits in with outline. This is from my Blueberries airport playset, the plane that my Blueberries A320 had originally came in for the playset. This isn't the exact model that came in the playset, but pretty much is the same exact livery design, so it really is no difference. But this one has the newer vehicle designs on it, which, I mean, I think definitely better represents the JetBlue A321, since it's the same exact logo that is on the catering truck, you can see right there, and is actually on the plane. So this one, I'm not sure, I do actually really like this, but I'm not sure if it really is too much blue that would be for the playset, especially considering that the colors are very similar for this box and for the plastic interior. But something about it, I just really like it, and honestly, it might be my favorite for it. And it definitely also makes the dark blue portion of the ribbons livery stand out a lot more if this was the actual playset for it. So overall, I think this model would have honestly been best if it was produced as a playset rather than just a single plane. And like I also mentioned before, the only single plane box I have is the Blueberries single plane box. So this one definitely would not go well with the ribbons livery A321, considering that this is the entire design for the tail livery of the Blueberries A320. So definitely would not go well with the ribbons livery A321. But overall, you can pretty much picture what the A321 would look like as a single plane if it had the box. Pretty much take this box, make it this exact color, and then just put the A321 there right inside of it, and then that would pretty much just be the whole entire thing. Not much to it, but I would be curious to see what the back of the box would look like if it had the A321 on it, and what the design for that would be as well. If it would just be the basic kind of runway look like this on the tarmac, or if it would have any other specific designs to it and say A321, I think that would be cool. If it also had big word writing that said A321 on it to signify that, I think that definitely would look really nice as well. But yeah, that pretty much is all the playset concepts I have. I mean, there really wasn't much else, just these two. Honestly, I think this model would have looked really great if it was produced as a playset. Preferably, maybe this one being my favorite, because otherwise, if you had these two vehicles and the other one, it would be a lot of just kind of plain white coloring, rather than having the nice blue contrast to it. But I think the box definitely would have to be a little bit different. But it would have been great if it had the playset box with the ribbons tail livery design on it. I think that would have been really cool, and especially if that was even for a single plane as well. So I kind of figured that this portion of the video would kind of take place of my box review for the plane, like I usually do whenever my Realtoy models have boxes for them, and I do it as part of the review video portion. Although normally I do the box review before the full model review, but I just figured with the time it took for all of the model information, I decided to do this before doing the entire box playset concept of review. So moving on to the full JetBlue Airways fleet review in comparison. Like I mentioned earlier, I was going to showcase each of the Realtoy JetBlue A320 models and compare it along with the A321neo. So starting off with the oldest of the JetBlue A320 models I have, this is the Mosaic tail livery design. I did do some research in between filming and was able to find all the actual names of the tail designs on the two older A320 models. So this is the Mosaic tail livery with the more multicolored box pattern on the tail. So this is the oldest of the Realtoy JetBlue models. I'm not sure if it is older than the fully blued tail design on the other A320 that I do not have. That is the other rarest of the JetBlue A320s. But, I mean, for comparing wise, pretty much just picture the tail being completely blue and not having any design on it. That would pretty much be the entire design of that A320 model. But I'm not sure if that one is older or is the same age as this one, but either way, this one is definitely older than the other tail design on the other retro one. So this one you can see here has the smallest of the JetBlue prints compared to everything else, and you can see definitely right there in the size comparison to that. And the older logo also had the beginning of the JetBlue name, the Jet being in a light gray color rather than being fully dark blue like it is on the newer logo design. So definitely see there the size comparison is very drastic for how much they changed it and updated it over the years. Trying to get my camera into focus here. See the names right there up at the front as well. One thing that the older A320 does have that the A321neo doesn't is the ground power unit, or the GPU, up at the front. You can see right there where there is the name for, on the older one at least, is where it says the Blue Yorker design right there. You can see is a small red outlined square with a small gray circle in it. That is what would be the GPU ground power unit for the A320. I also showcased that in one of my other more recent review videos for the Iberia Airlines A320. That is one that had that, and that was the first time I actually really had fully talked about that for any review on an A320 model. So I think that would have been cool if they did incorporate that into the A320neo to make it just a slightly more realistic, but either way, it still is pretty cool that it's on the older one. And I did also notice here, as I'll get into later, it kind of hops around between the A320 livery designs from what actually has the GPU on it and what one doesn't. So, but that is one of the main differences there for at least general livery design. And then in addition to that is that the older one does have a registration number, and then the A321neo does not have an actual registration number. So another thing too I mentioned before, the A320 also does not have any flaps designs on the under portion of the wings, while the A321 does have that design on it. So quick tail comparison right here. I mean, definitely you could see the size differences between the A320 and A321, which definitely kind of adds on to the fact that why Realtoys are not considered to be really realistic to each other, because the size and scale differences are completely different. But I think this is a really nice comparison there. I really like the Mosaic livery on the JetBlue ones. It's my favorite of the three tail designs on the older retro Realtoy JetBlue models. So I think these two definitely go well together with the Mosaic and the newer ribbons tail livery design. So moving on to the other retro JetBlue model, this is the Bubbles tail livery design on the retro model. I was trying to research this, and one option that came up is also the blueberries, but I did not think that they had updated the blueberries. I think they kind of kept everything as just this one specific name and not updating anything specifically. But you can see right there the really nice tail livery design comparison to that as well. All of the JetBlue Airways kind of tail designs and colors pretty much has the same basic shades of blue, at least in some way or another. These two also really nice in comparison, but I do like the Mosaic a little bit better just because the Bubbles tail design right here has a little bit more of a much darker background than on the ribbon designs. But just like on the other older livery, the Bubbles tail livery design does have an actual registration number, while the A321neo does not have a real registration number. But another thing too is that this one does not have an American flag beside the registration number, while the A321neo does have an American flag, and then the other Mosaic tail livery also does have an American flag beside the registration number. So there were several things that were different with these models. And another thing too I also noticed is that this one does not have a GPU, and the other retro livery does have it. And then you can see right there is the major logo size differences. It's much smaller on the oldest one, and then gets a little bit larger on the newest one right here, and then it is the largest and most currently updated on the A320neo, A321neo, and then on the A320 Blueberries livery as well, which I'll show in just a second. But comparison with these models, just like every A320, this does not have the wing flaps on the under portion of the tail, but overall, really great comparison right there. I think one thing I also mentioned before is the major differences between the noses on each of these planes. I think I kind of mentioned how the A320 definitely looks more like an Embraer type nose rather than an Airbus, because it's a lot more pointy than it really should be. And on this model, the cockpit windows seem to be really placed kind of too far down along the middle section of the plane rather than supposed to be further up, but they do look to be a little bit better on the other retro A320 that I have. So yeah, you can definitely see right there in comparison how the A321neo has a much more realistic Airbus nose than the A320, how the A320 kind of reminds me more of an Embraer type nose design for that. But overall, pretty nice comparison for the JetBlue liveries, and I think JetBlue definitely has some of the nicest tail livery designs. And one of my favorite things that airlines can do with the liveries is kind of keep things changed up between certain things, like how Frontier has every one of their planes has a different tail design and a different theme for it for a different animal, and I really like how JetBlue has multiple different kinds of tail livery designs for their planes. Moving on to the newest version of the JetBlue A320, this is the current Blueberries tail design. So this one is the most updated compared from the other retro livery design. This one was first released in the early 2010s. So this one right here has pretty much everything else that the original JetBlue A321 had, with the GPU up at the front beside of the name. For the Blueberries one is all wrapped up in blue, and then it has the American flag beside the real registration number. So A321, like I said before, I keep saying that too, I really wish it had a real registration number, because the name for the plane is on an actual A321neo, so all they had to do was just put the simple registration number. In this case, it would have been N2142J on the back of the plane, just to kind of keep it going. But it was a prototype, so honestly, probably they might have actually had added it later on if they were going to actually release this plane, but since it was a prototype, I guess they decided not to. But nice comparison here between the two new versions of the JetBlue tail designs. These are the only current ones that you will be able to see in comparison, since there is no other modern JetBlue model that is going to be made in their current livery design. This is the only comparison you will be able to see with the two newest versions of the JetBlue tails. Really nice comparison there. You see the JetBlue Blueberries one has the rudder design on the back. You see the gray line that kind of cuts right through where it says JetBlue right there in the back portion of that. But really nice comparison those. Like I also said before, there is some pretty much the same shades of blue that are used in a majority of the JetBlue tail designs to kind of keep the nice tradition going of that. But overall, both of them do say they're Airbus. They have their Airbus logos. You can see down right there underneath the registration number, and then from the A320, and then on the A321, you can see underneath where it is the American flag towards the rear of the plane. I do really wish on the A321 that they actually kind of made the logo a little bit larger, because it can be really hard to see. I think I also mentioned this while I was reviewing the entire portion of the JetBlue A321. Now, since the logo is very small, it can actually be really difficult to see that it says Neo beside A321. But I'm actually really impressed that it still looks like it says Neo when you zoom in, because just that really great amount of painted detail that they have right there to kind of keep all the numbers and letters still spaced out for how small they are. So, but yeah, that pretty much is the whole comparison for the entire JetBlue Airways fleet. So I tried my best to get a full JetBlue Airways fleet lineup with all of the Realtoy models that I have and all of the livery designs. You can see right here up at front is the two retro liveries with the mosaic, and then going into the bubbles tail livery design, and then transitioning into the two new liveries with the Blueberries A320, and then the ribbons livery all the way down there in the back on the A321neo. So the only difficult part about this is that I can't get each of the tail designs all in focus at the same time, so I kind of have to transition between each one. and going from each of them to being in focus, but still is really nice getting to have the full nice fleet lineup there, and you could see each of the tail livery designs, even though the retro tail designs are not currently flying on any JetBlue aircraft, but it still is really cool having this nice, really cool fleet lineup with all of the JetBlue Realtoy models and then the A321neo. And even though this is not the full fleet of the JetBlue Realtoy models, there still are 3 others with the 2 non-released ones that are still out there. But this is pretty much the best you can get with all of the basic white fuselage livery designs on the JetBlue models, so still it's great having this really nice comparison for all of these. But if you would like to see a better video of this full JetBlue Airways lineup, I have that posted at the end of this video. So while I'm still on the topic of the Airbus A320, I wanted to mention 2 models that I have that I think would look amazing on the A321 as a newly updated model. The first one being the Frontier Airbus A320, specifically because the livery that they use on this one, the Spot the Jaguar livery, is actually supposed to be on the A321, and for a while there was a lot of speculation for Realtoy collectors that this was actually the A321 model, even though it just is in the basic A320 mold. But the actual aircraft that has this livery for Frontier Airlines is on an A321, which definitely would look a lot better on the A321 mold anyway. So I'm not really sure why at the time that Daron had released the updated Frontier A320, I'm not sure why they didn't just use a livery design that was on an A320 already, because they do have Airbus A320s in their fleet. Not as many as they have for the A321, but they do have the normal A320 CEO in their fleet. So I'm not sure why Daron and Realtoy didn't just decide to put one of those livery designs on there, but this one would definitely be the best one to have as an updated A321 model, because the actual livery design on the plane is supposed to be on an A321 anyway. So I think just this livery in general would actually look a lot more realistic if it was on the actual A321 mold. And at least with the A321 actually being a real model now, definitely can kind of put the argument to rest that this is not an A321 model, even though it does have the livery design. Just like the Southwest Airlines Canyon Blue livery 737, the mold for the aircraft is a 737-400, but the actual livery from the registration number on the aircraft is from a 737-300. And then the other A320 aircraft that I have that I think would look great on the A321 has to be the Spirit A320. Even though Spirit does have the Airbus A320 in their fleet, I just think it would look a lot better if it was on the new A321neo aircraft. I'm not sure if for the CEOs they would have to probably maybe remove the winglets or something and add a little bit of, and just kind of to apply the A320 wingtips right here and apply that onto the A320 to make it a CEO. But Spirit does have the A321neo in their fleet, so it would look really nice for this livery design to be on the A321neo as well. But hopefully Spirit does not end up going out of business, so that way the airline can stay around for a lot longer, and we can continue seeing this livery and possibly see Daron update it onto the new A321, as Daron is hopefully going to be increasing their production of it, starting with their new release of the newest JetBlue Airways livery design in the upcoming months. But I just think this is another model that will look really great if it were to be updated on the A321, and just will continue to look a lot more realistic, and I just think that would definitely look really great. So moving on to the last main portion of this video, I will be doing a comparison with each different aircraft mold that Realtoy has produced, and along with the A321neo, just to showcase the different size and scale differences for each of the models, going through all of the Airbus and then all of the Boeing aircraft. So I already did the full review for the A320, so moving on to the next aircraft in the lineup, and this is the A330. Even though it is very similar to the A340 fuselage, and I will be doing a quick review of both of those, there still are certain differences, but the main thing that they have in common is kind of the main portion of the wings there, especially for the winglets and specifically the cockpits. The mold for the A330 does not have the cockpit specifically placed in, and honestly, if the cockpit was not painted onto the aircraft, you couldn't even tell that there was supposed to be one in there. For the A320 though, you could see right here, it has a more specific curved line that would show where the cockpit would be placed on the aircraft, while the A330 just kind of does not have that extra curvature in it. It just has everything as one giant curved line right there. So The engines is another big difference here. You could see the A330 engines are very small compared to the A321neo. The A321neo also has a little bit more curvature in the design of it, while the A330 has very unrealistic designs to it. See right there, the engine cowling is larger than the actual engine itself. So winglets here, for comparison, the A330 winglets are much smaller than the sharklets on the A321neo. So, I mean, that is pretty much the same thing on the actual aircrafts as well, but considering that the A330 is supposed to be a wide-body aircraft, it is relatively the same size to the A321, but you see right there, again, the differences for the winglet designs, but the A330 does have wing flaps on the undersection of the wings, so that is just like the A321 there as well. But overall, the A330 and A321 are relatively the same sizes, but I think the A330 has a slightly wider fuselage than the A321, and then the horizontal stabilizers on the A330 are a little bit thinner than they are on the A321. And then one other thing that the A321 has that is different than the A330 is specifically the rear section of the plane. You could see is a lot more pointy on the A321 than it is on the A330. The aircraft for this is the discontinued Alitalia A330 that I was using for specifically to showcase this. A really nice stickered model that Daron had and Realtoy had produced for a really long time until they eventually discontinued it several years ago. But then you can see the undersection of the planes right there. I think every single one of these pretty much has the same size main landing gear. So it's just Realtoy's signature design for their thing with their logo on the underneath side there as well. Moving on to the next aircraft in the lineup, this is going to be the A340, very similar to the Airbus A330, except for specific differences in the wings and for the engines. But overall, the cockpit design is pretty much exactly the same. Another thing too, for the A330 and A340, for both of these, is that they are known for having really wobbly nose landing gears. I'm not sure why, it just has to do something with the manufacturing for each of the aircraft. A340 does have the wing flaps on the underside, just like the A321. The winglet designs are pretty much the same for the sharklets. I think they might be a little bit larger on the A340 than they are on the A330. You can see the engine sizes there a little bit better on the A340 than they are on the A330, but still you can see the A340's engines are much smaller than compared to what they are on the A321neo, and still the A321neo has a much better design for the engines there as well. Another thing too is that the engine cowlings on the inside of the A340's wings are, Daron tried with it, but they're not at all realistic, and they honestly probably would look better if they didn't even put anything in there as well, because they're really just a bunch of lines mushed together into just one giant blob of stuff. So A321 definitely has much better design on the engines for that as well. The aircraft for this one is the common A340 model, the Swiss A340. This is the only common A340 that Realtoy has produced in a long time, so it still is currently available. I believe Daron is still manufacturing it under their ownership. Moving on to the next aircraft in lineup, this is going to be the Airbus A350. So the A350 was the other most recently introduced model of the mold, right behind the A321. Even though the A350 has been released for quite a while now, I'm not exactly sure when the A350 was first released. I believe Iberia was one of the first ones to be produced. I'm not sure if it was in 2015, 2016, or 2017, but one of those years was when the A350 was first released, and it has been quite a while since Realtoy has introduced a new mold, and the A321 was supposed to be the next one in lineup. For JetBlue models, it was supposed to be the 5th aircraft in the lineup for livery designs, but for the specific molds, it was supposed to be the next one after the A350. The A350 is relatively realistic, but I do feel like there are some slight issues for the cockpits. You can see right there, I mean, the cockpits on the nose sections of the planes compared from the A320 family for the A350 is definitely very different. The A350 has a much different cockpit design, nose section of the aircraft design compared to the rest of the Airbus fleet. But overall, you can see the engines are really nicely designed on both of the A350 and the A321. I believe Both of them are pretty much tied for their really nice designs there for the engine cowlings, and they are pretty much relative the same size. A350 has a little bit larger engines on there. Great design on the sharklets for both of these. A350s are slightly smaller, but it's still really nice. Pretty much same general overall design for it, just the A321s are larger than the A350s for that. But the horizontal stabilizers are relatively the same size, actually, on both the A350 and the A321. A350s are a little bit more pointy on the ends than the A321. Overall, pretty good. The A350 has a little bit less wing flap design on the underside of the wings than there is on the A321, but overall, like I also mentioned before, pretty sure that most of these have pretty much the same size main landing gear, except on the A350 is a little bit wider than it is on the A321. A350 has a little bit wider fuselage, I believe, or pretty much, I guess they might be the same size. And then the A350 has a longer wingspan than it is on the A321. Overall, A350 is still larger than the A321. Moving on to the last Airbus aircraft in lineup, this is the A380. Definitely is not accurate to scale, which is something that I know a lot of Gemini Jets collectors complain about for Realtoys, but they keep forgetting that these models are supposed to be made as toy collectibles and not supposed to be realistic. But see right here, the A380 has a very similar design to the A330 and A340 for nose section, where it doesn't really have any specific designs for curvature where the cockpit would be, so as there is on the A350. Overall, engines are still larger on the A321 than there are on the A380. Pretty much every 4-engine aircraft engines are going to be larger on the 2-engine ones since they have a lot more room to work with, but you see right there, comparison for the wingtips and the winglet designs. And then, I mean, A380 is a relatively self-explanatory model in comparison to A321, because it is going to be smaller since it is, if it were to actually to scale, the Realtoy would have to make a much larger scale version of the A380. See there, the tails are definitely a lot different for each of the aircraft, where the A380s is much larger, and overall wingspan design, A380 is still larger than the A321. So moving on to the first Boeing aircraft in this lineup, this is going to be the 737. I do not have the 737-400 for this because it's pretty much the same exact one as the 800, except it does not have winglets, so I decided to just use the newest one with the winglet designs. So this one here, you can see the A321 does have larger winglets, sharklets on there than the 737. 737 is much wider than it is than the A321, but overall, the size comparison it's close, but still not accurate. The 737-800 still should be a lot smaller than the A321, but overall cockpit design, you can see right here, the 737 also doesn't have as significant of curvature as the A321, but still is pretty realistic compared for the aircraft. Engine design, 737 has larger engines, but honestly, the A321 still looks a little bit more realistic in my opinion. Has more signified engine cowlings on the inside of the engines, and then the Realtoy logo on the bottom main landing gear is a little bit wider on the 737 than the A321, and the 737 has larger and much longer horizontal stabilizers on there as well. Moving on to the next Boeing aircraft in this lineup, this is going to be the 747. For whatever Realtoy models that had their house liveries for it, I'm going to be using like the A380, I'll be using for the 777 and then the 787 as well. But 747 A321 is definitely a lot larger than it really should be for the 747, but still, that's one thing for the Realtoy models is you don't do anything based on scale size because they are supposed to be made as toy collectibles and not necessarily to be realistic. Engine sizes are still larger on the A321. The horizontal stabilizers are larger on the 747 than they are on the A321, but lengthwise, I think they're pretty much the same. Winglets, 747s are definitely much smaller than on the sharklets for the A320, but the 747 also does not have much signified curvature for the cockpit, as the A321 does. A321 still does have the most realistic cockpit and nose section design in my opinion, but landing gear, stabilizers, nose landing gear is pretty much it's pretty sturdy on most aircraft. It's just specifically on the A330 and A340 that have that really loose nose landing gear. So moving on to the next aircraft in the lineup, this is the model that I believe the A321 is the closest to and could possibly be what the A321 is replacing, and that is the Boeing 757. So this is the Delta 757. This is the newest one that, along with Air Force 2, that Daron and Realtoy have been producing. This specific model came in the large Delta Airport playset, and as you can see right here, both of them have very similar resemblance. One thing I don't think I mentioned before when I was doing the full model review for the JetBlue A321 is that this model is actually very light compared to the rest of the Realtoy models. So compared to most of them, even the A320 and specifically the larger wide-body aircraft, the A321 is actually very light. And I mean, just even looking at it too, it definitely has very close resemblance to the 757. Apart from, of course, the 757 does not have winglets and the fact that it is a little bit thinner than the A321. But overall, the length of the aircrafts are pretty much the same, and in general, they have very similar designs and wingspans too. So I really do believe that the Delta 757, once eventually after 2030, when Delta will be retiring the 757 from their fleet, and overall, the large Delta Airport playset does still have the 777 in it, which has been out of the actual airline's fleet now since 2020. So I definitely think it would be around time for Daron to update that playset. So I definitely think the A321 could be replacing the Delta 757, and you'll see this livery eventually be on the A321. I do think it will look nice, especially as Delta Airlines is trying to move towards a complete Airbus fleet. I definitely think the Delta Airlines 757 transitioning into the A321 would definitely be very likely for the future of the Daron models, and especially for the large airport playset. As for what will replace the 777, especially as the 767 is going to be into retirement in the next several years as well, I definitely think the large airport playset could possibly be the A321 along with the Delta A350, and then A350 will also be a single plane as well. So overall, the comparison for it, the nose and front sections of the plane, still the A321 does have a little bit more realistic. I think the 757's nose and cockpit are a little bit too pointy than they should be for the actual aircraft, but both of them, they still do look really similar height-wise. The 757 does look to be a little bit shorter than there is on the A321, but overall the lengths of the aircrafts are very similar, the wingspans and everything there as well, and it really does look to be pretty much similar aircraft designs for the models. The main difference is, I mean, put some winglets on the 757, I think it would look almost identical to it, apart from the nose cockpit section, of course. But overall, both of them are very similar. And you can see right here on the back as well, the A321 does have a longer rear portion, but both of them pretty much have the same exact horizontal stabilizers on both aircraft models. So overall, both of them do look really similar. 757 does have a little bit thinner engines, but both of them do look to be the same length as well. But moving on to the third to last and the next aircraft in the lineup, this is going to be the Delta 767. I decided to just keep the Delta fleet going, also because this is the only 767 I have that has a fully white fuselage, and then the undercarriage is light blue for the Delta Airlines logo. But the 767 is really similar to the 757, except it's just overall is a little bit larger and longer than it is. The fuselage is wider and a little bit taller too, but overall still is kind of similar to the 757 in general design and real life and for these models as well. So the engines are still thinner. They are larger on the A321 than they are on the 767 for the model, but overall, the engine cowlings on the models on the 767 at least they still do look realistic, more compared to than the A330 at least. But horizontal stabilizers are a lot larger on the 767 than on the A321. But overall, wingspans are actually very similar. They pretty much are the same. If the A321 had its sharklets laid flat, then it definitely would be pretty much the same length to the A320 to the 767. but cockpit section still does look more realistic for the A321 than on the 767. So moving on to the next aircraft in the lineup, this is going to be the Boeing 777. So one of the main things for these two aircraft, even though they pretty much are completely different, one thing that is very similar is the engine sizes. If you look right here, they actually do seem to be almost like the same type of engines, except the fact that the A321 actually has a more specific outline on the engine for the front of it right there on the cowling, and then the 777 does not have that at all. But the fan blades on the inside also do look really similar, but they are a little bit more realistic on the A321 than they are on the 777. As for model length and wingspan, they are pretty much the same lengths for both the fuselages, but of course the 777 has a much wider fuselage and is a little bit taller as well. The Realtoy logo on the main landing gear is still larger on the 777 since it has a wider fuselage for that. Wingspan is larger on the 777 than there is on the A321, but I do think, same thing for the 767, if you lay the sharklets on the A321 flat, it pretty much would be kind of the similar length that is on the 777. And then the 777 has slightly larger horizontal stabilizers on there as well. And then the tails are also really pretty similar. I mean, size, it's a little bit larger on the 777, but overall not too much. So moving on to the last aircraft in this lineup, this is going to be the Boeing 787. This one I have here in the newer Dreamliner house livery design. This one is going to have the most major difference for the models here, since especially you have the much different wing pattern design and then the horizontal stabilizers there as well. You could definitely see a major difference. I think this model definitely has the most significant difference to the A321 as for just basic Realtoy design. As for any other aircraft, the major differences right there you see in the cockpits. And engines are much larger on the 787 than they are on the A321, and the engine families on the inside still are there, but honestly, they still are more realistic on the A321 in my opinion. And then you see the wingspan there, 787 is much different than to the A321, and I think the rest of that is pretty self-explanatory, and also the fact that the 787 has much different main landing gear than on the A321. So I think the rest of all that for the comparison, pretty self-explanatory, but overall size, the 787 is still a little bit larger than the A321. So after going through the entire history, information, and full in-depth review for the JetBlue A321neo, the playset concepts, the review showcasing the entire Realtoy JetBlue Airways fleet, and finally the size and scale comparison of the A321 with every aircraft mold Realtoy has made, that pretty much wraps up this entire review video. I cannot thank Realtoy Plane Collector enough for letting me borrow this amazing and priceless Daron Realtoy model from his collection. Once again, the links to both his YouTube and Instagram accounts are posted in the description. Be sure to check those out and see all his other posts of his incredible Daron Realtoy collection. This will forever be the most special review video on my channel and the rarest and most exclusive model I will have ever reviewed. I am very grateful that I was able to give everyone an in-depth and close-up review of this very mysterious Realtoy model, and I'm honored to have had it as part of my collection for this time being. In final conclusion, and in my opinion, this Daron Realtoy JetBlue Airways Ribbons Tail Livery Airbus A321neo is by far the most realistic aircraft mold the company has ever made, and has really become my new favorite aircraft mold just for that reason. Although it is very disappointing that this exact model never saw full production and only 2 prototypes were ever made, it is great that Daron still has plans to release a new JetBlue A321neo in their newest livery design later this year, so the new A321 mold will not be going to waste. And lastly, I cannot believe that it has been 4 years since I first started my YouTube channel, and I'm forever grateful for all the support everyone has given me over these last 4 years to really help my channel grow and improve it into what it is now, and I can't wait to see what the future holds. With that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.